people's vote because they might not be living their values. And so we wind up holding up a mirror to other people who then see back reflected to them something that they're uncomfortable with and aren't doing anything about. And so what we have to do is understand that that has nothing to do with us. Nothing at all. And so we can't take it personally when someone does get hostile or defensive. We have to understand that they're going through their own stuff, that there's stuff happening for them. That has nothing to do with us. And we can be compassionate toward them, understanding that this is an opportunity for them to talk to someone who might be able to answer some questions that they have, even if those questions come across in a hostile way, sometimes they do, or in a defensive way. I still think they're questions, and it's an opportunity to answer them. So if we can remember where we end and another person begins, I think we can be much more effective, not only as advocates, because you might not consider yourself an advocate. That's okay, but at least being comfortable in your own skin and not feeling like, God, I'm never gonna say that again. I'm never gonna say I'm vegan again because this is what happens when I do. That's not the answer. The answer is to realize where you end, another person begins, and then, from there you can have a dialogue with someone. So standing in that space of being the vegan in the room, I think is really powerful, and really understanding why that stuff happens. So another thing to talk about when it comes to our language, I'll just touch on this briefly. Those of you who listen to my podcast know I talk a lot about language, and the way we talk about food, I think, is also really important in terms of how we represent veganism. And it's not to put the pressure on you, but you know that when they meet you, like you represent every vegan, right? So no pressure. And I know people feel that pressure, and I do think being the best ambassadors is, it is on us, right? And we do the best we can. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect or be expert in all of those things that we named before, but the way we talk about veganism, and those who were in my talk yesterday heard me talk about it, stop talking about vegan food like it's something so separate. And when we do that, we also use language like fake and faux and alternative and substitute and replacement and analog, and that just makes it sound like the meat, dairy, and eggs are the barometer by which we have to measure everything else. Because anything that's not meat, dairy, and eggs, animal-based meat, dairy, and eggs, then is inferior. Does that make sense? So when we say things like replacement or substitute or imitation, right, or fake or faux, then we are conceding that that is the status quo that belongs in the superior position and everything else is inferior to that. So I talk about just calling it what it is. I talk about the fact that the word meat originally meant solid food versus liquid, and we still say it when we say coconut meat or the meat of a nut, right? It was an Old English word that literally meant solid food to distinguish it from a beverage. So when we say something like grain-based meat or plant-based meat or soy-based meat or nut-based meat, that's completely valid, and we can take back that word and use it to refer to plant-based meats. Of course, when we're talking about milks, same thing. And when we're talking about the meats as well, calling it grain meat, it's one of the things I fell in love with about field roast when I first discovered them, not only because they're amazing, their food is so good. Have anybody who's not had the hand-formed burger from Field Roast raise your hand? It is unbelievable. Like their burgers, everything they do, their roasts, of course, with holidays coming, a lot of people get their roasts, and of course their sausages are fantastic. So, but one of the things I loved about what David does is he calls them grain-based meat. Now, there's grain meats, and actually that's one of the reasons that the government in Canada told them they can't continue to be on the shelves in supermarkets in Canada, because if it's called meat, it has to have animal products in it. So we're talking about paradigm shifts here. I mean, this is massive, and we're talking about this, and companies and governments, and everybody who remembers what happened with Just Mayo, and it's still happening. It's not over because again, if it's mayonnaise, if it's called mayonnaise or mayo, by definition, that has to have eggs in it. And so we are in a time where we're pushing the envelope, but it's called it's called like advancement. That's what it's called, right? Like moving forward and doing things differently and better. So our language is really, really important. So calling it plant-based meats, and of course with milks as well, calling them what they are, calling them plant-based milks or soy milks or or non-dairy milks or plant, or almond milk, whatever it is. Same things with eggs. I do tend to say chicken's eggs just because I don't know if you're talking about robin's eggs. I don't know if you're talking about ostrich eggs. I don't know if you're talking about human eggs. I don't know. So, because we have them too, but not all of you. half of us. So I like to say chickens, eggs, but what that also does is it reminds people that there is a chicken involved, or hen's eggs, that would be also appropriate, because it reminds people that there was an animal in this process. Because what we do is remove the animal from all of this and completely forget that there was a living being who was exploited for the meat, dairy, and eggs. So I really encourage us, and I hear so many vegans still use the word fake, and then in front of me they're like, I didn't mean fake, I meant, so good, I want you to be afraid. So think of me every time you say something like that, picture me looking at you and giving you the stink eye, and then changing the way you say that, okay? Can you try that? Can you practice it? And it is practice. It is practice. It really is, because we're so used to saying these things again and again. So it really does take practice, and so you can mess up, but I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be watching, so I'm going to look out. And then, of course, that's the language around food, but then there's also the language around animals. And, of course, this is just a pet peeve of mine and a project of mine, because I think it is so important to not only not be violent against animals for real, but in our language, because that perpetuates the violence against them, because it all perpetuates that they're here for us and that we can do to them whatever we want. And so if you think about these idioms, I know a lot of you have already heard me talk about this, I'll just run through a couple. But when we say things like kill two birds with one stone, there's more than one way to skin a cat, there's, you can drag a horse to water, why are you dragging the horse, open a can of worms, why are the worms in a can, all of these things that we do that reflect this real, violence against animals. And you don't realize that these are idioms. Idioms are there for a reason. They're there to create a visual, when you're saying it, look, nothing wrong with idioms, but when we're using these idioms, they just keep perpetuating that in our culture and with each other. But when you say something like, cut two carrots with one knife, in context, someone goes, what did you just say? And they go, oh wow, instead of cut two carrots, wow, the birds, killing, why are we stoning them? And then they hear it for the first time. And so there's also a way to correct people when they say it. And I've done it, and there's a way to do it so that it doesn't look like you're there correcting them and, shaming them. But, if they say something like, blah, 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 kill two birds with one stone, I might say, or cut two carrots with one knife. And they go, oh, interesting, I like that. So we can be the ambassadors of compassionate language, doing it ourselves, saying it ourselves. There's more than one way to peel a potato, there's more than one way to peel a carrot, however you want to say that. There's, don't put your socks, what's the one, instead of the horse, don't put your socks on before don't put your shoes on before your socks, kind of thing. So I have them all up on my, I have them in all books and media. You can find these, and you can email me and ask me those. But, and then the Vegan's Daily Companion, I have a whole bunch of those. So does that make sense? Just kind of changing our language so that we're reflecting that compassion. That's not political correctness. It's just correctness. It's just kindness. It's not political correctness. It's, and it doesn't mean we remove all animal idioms. There are some that are fine. Actually walking on eggshells, I don't have a problem with that, walking on eggs, because eggs are very tender, delicate things, and you don't want to crush them under your foot, right? So it's not like we're doing away with all animal idioms, but the ones that are so violent against animals, those are the ones that I prefer to change. So those are some things around language and words and communication. And again, I just know that we feel so much pressure to talk to our family members and how to deal with the questions we get from them. And so what I would really love to do is open the questions what's my preposition? I want to offer the questions to you, open the questions to you. See, I am good at language, just look out. And see if you have any questions. And of course I can, we have some prompts. Amanda has some questions anyway that she thought would be helpful, but I wanted to see if you were interested in asking me any questions about communication and language and family and holidays. And there is a microphone. If you can ask me, I will repeat the question as long as I can hear it. If you're way back there ready to run out the door, just want to sit in the last seat in the last row, that might be difficult. But I can hear you guys and then I'll repeat the question for all of you, okay? So I saw a hand.
Yeah. How do you deal with family at Thanksgiving that doesn't want to ask you directly why you're not eating turkey, but they're kind of making negative, snippy, comments.
Yeah, that's a good question. Did everybody hear that? So how do you deal with family who they don't want to ask you directly why you don't eat turkeys or animals, but they make snippy comments instead? So they're making snippy comments because they're uncomfortable and because they know what the answer is, but they don't want to give that to you. And so it's a lot easier. So remember that mirror I said that we hold up. If you're not self-evolved, and how many of us are, when you see that mirror in any situation when we're interacting with other human beings held up to you, it is rare that someone says, interesting, there's something there I need to examine. I'm gonna go journal about that. Like, it's not common, right? Now there might be some people who still do. The defensiveness comes from, I'm not comfortable with that, so I'm gonna deflect that discomfort back on you and make a joke, or make a silly comment, or be snippy, or be defensive, or what have you. Starting there, if that's where we just at least understand, is that it's not because they're insensitive that they're doing that, it's because they're sensitive, right? It's not because they're so insensitive that they're making a hostile, insensitive comment, it's because they're so sensitive. And this is the hope that I have, this is what I hold when I see that stuff happen, is that they're this close. Because they know if they just ask you a question and you answer it truthfully about compassion, that they might have to reconsider what they're doing. That's how close they are. That they don't want to, that's why they go, I don't want to look, don't tell me, I don't want to see, I don't want to look, I don't want to hear, I don't want to know. Because they know that they're going to be compelled to make a change if you answer the question. So, how do we then answer the question before it's even asked? So there's things we can do. First of all, I want everyone to be authentically who they are, and if being joyful, being vegan is one of the things that's true for you, then be that, right? I'm not saying to fake it. I want you to be authentic, and I want you to have authentic interactions with your family members. But if you're joyful, living a compassionate life, if that's something that resonates with you, then be that. And that also means kind of taking some things on the chin and also just having a sense of humor. So there might be some, opportunities to laugh. Haha, never heard that one before. Right? I've said that 3 times myself, right? Yeah. And then they can, okay, fine, you want to get it, right? They at least see that that you're not taking it so seriously. It's a serious issue, violence against animals, but we can also have a sense of humor, and I think that's really helpful. Related to that, I do think also that the way we think about the people who are with us, it influences how we interact with them. And if we are looking at the people who are in our lives or in that room as, really awful, insensitive, people, then that's how we're going to react. That's how we're going to interact with them. So I think it starts also up here about seeing them as compassionate people and speaking to the highest in them when we can. And that's challenging. But you don't get credit for speaking compassionately to people who are already compassionate. Like, you don't get credit for that. Where it's really hard is actually speaking compassionately and patiently and with tolerance and kindness to people who are more difficult. Like, that's where the true test is, right? Doesn't mean we're going to be perfect all the time. But I also think, when I mentioned all of those things that we feel like we're supposed to be expert in, we don't have to be expert in all of those things. And I think asking questions is also a really powerful way of answering questions. Because often the questions will come as a challenge, and I think it's really helpful to put it back on them and say, well, what do you think? Well, why don't you eat animals? What you like turkeys? Well, whatever, like a joke. Well, so why don't you eat turkeys? I love them, they taste really good, right? I mean, that's kind of one of the things that someone might say. And, however that's gonna play out. But one of the things you can say back is, well, what do you think? Why do you think I don't wanna eat turkeys? And even just saying turkeys versus turkey, which is another little language trick that I use, which is powerful because it puts the animal back in that inanimate centerpiece. Then let them answer the question. Or the animals we're going to be run over by turkeys. Turkeys are going to take over the world if we stop eating them. That's your biggest fear? Like, really? Like, that's your fear? Like, that's what you're worried about? And if they say that, you can be like, do you really believe that? And they might go, no, I don't really believe that. let them be accountable for what they're saying. It doesn't always have to be us being, having all the answers and having all this magic that we think we're gonna have at that moment. Be authentic, speak your truth, and as you know, I always say, don't be attached to what that truth is. Don't be attached to the seeds that you plant. Let go once you plant them. But does that help? Any of it? Any of it help? Okay, good. good. I know, especially this time of year, but what an opportunity to be ambassadors of compassion at this time of year when we are confronted by these symbols like turkey. It is just a symbol. I mean, what Thanksgiving, anybody would tell you that Thanksgiving is about gratitude and community and family and gathering, right? The turkeys have become the symbol for that. We're attached to the symbol rather than the true meaning. And we want to convey the true meaning of this holiday and communicate that with our loved ones, but getting them to really go, yeah, it's not about the turkey, it's about family. That's what we're so happy about. Let them be accountable for what I do believe they really do care about. I'll say this too, just because it's on my mind while I'm thinking about the turkey. One of the things that's so hard is that, these are family members and friends. We love them and they love us. I assume, for the most part. But, I know that there are people who don't go to these events because they don't want to be confronted by this and by the turkey, that's at the center, whatever. But, I think there are ways to still be with our families and our friends, our loved ones, and still ask for what we need, or at least tell them what this means to us. Because I think a lot of us don't necessarily say to our family and friends how much this means to us. We presume they're gonna figure it out based on the fact that we don't eat animals. I mean, imagine the process of becoming vegan, and then you go to your family. Now you had like 6 months or a year or whatever it took you before you went to your family and came out, because that's one of the steps that we go through, right? We come out to our families, and maybe it's around the holidays that we do, and we say, I'm vegan, and they freak out, or they have a reaction, or they're defensive, or whatever, and we go, can't you just understand? Why don't you just understand? I can't believe you don't understand. They had like a day to process what you just said, that you had 6 months to a year, or whatever amount of time you took to process. It could be weeks even, but give them time, and give them the benefit of the doubt. Because honestly, I think the first year is just all about everybody kind of changing the dance steps. You change, they have to change. And that's just what happens. With veganism or not, just like we change the dance when we change the steps. And they have to go, oh, I gotta do this, I have to do this, right? And they have to kind of figure it out. So remember that. And then also, we could say things like, this means so much to me. I want you to know, this isn't about you. Thank you for raising me to be a compassionate person. It's your fault. Talk about deflection, huh? I like that. It's your fault. Sorry, you made me you told me to be thoughtful and critically think and compassionate, and here it is. This is what it looks like. So blame them. That's what I'm saying. But telling them what it means to us, because I don't think we do a lot. I think we just kind of assume that they know what it means and what it is, right? And they don't. And so letting them know that it's painful. Once your eyes are open, and you know what the turkeys have gone through, and you know how many millions of turkeys are killed just for Thanksgiving, and it's about 46 million, by the way, just for Thanksgiving. And it's so painful to see that on the table. Mom, can you keep the turkey in the kitchen so that when I'm sitting at the table with you, I'm not staring at this thing. I'm not asking you to not have turkey. If that's what you need, and that's what you do, and that's what people expect, I'm not even asking for that. But can you keep it in the kitchen? And people can serve themselves so I don't have to sit there, right? Something so there's some kind of understanding between one another and maybe some compromise, right? So there's those little things I think can make a difference in our interactions with our family, that we might not get exactly what we want, which is I want them to have a vegan Thanksgiving, and you might, that happens too, but you might get something so it's not so painful, but you can still be with your family. Does that make sense? Yes?
What's your response when, you have the holidays, when someone that tries to make you feel like your diet is inconvenient, how you're weighing out to do this, and what you might want to say, well, your diet is inconvenient, well, we have a little bit of a plan.
So what do I say when people say that your being vegan is inconvenient because it's making me do things, right, that's different. So sorry, I'm making you evolve. That's really, really mean. Right, that's what this is about. Like, we are in relationships with one another that push us in other directions and teach us things that we didn't know before. If we don't learn from each other, we're stagnant and then we're dead. Like, that's what living is. It's about change. And so, vegan is one way that people are forced to do things differently than they had done before. It's one way that we as children, of parents, all of us, adult children, parents, whatever, have our own values. That's what growing up is. That's what growing up is you gave me these values, you taught me this, thank you, and now I'm actually gonna do it this way, right? It could be religion, it could be politics, it could be food, whatever. But the point is, if we're afraid to ever rock the boat with our families because they're gonna deem it inconvenient or whatever, then we're never going to get anywhere, and we're never going to be adults because we're never going to live our own lives and realize, again, this is where we end and another person begins. And the bottom line is, in that context, they might find it inconvenient. That's their problem. And I don't mean that in a way to say, that's your problem, deal with it. I mean it like, that's their stuff, and they might find it inconvenient. Now, having said that, in every way possible, we can make it as convenient for them. So once we say, look, in terms of like big picture inconvenience, fine. But in terms of like, oh, you want to make mashed potatoes, but you want to make 2 versions of mashed potatoes, one for me and one for everybody. How about everybody eat the same batch of mashed potatoes, and let's use Earth Balance and non-dairy butter, which is fantastic, and and let's use soy milk instead, or whatever kind of milk, right? Mom, would you be willing to do that? Yeah, that's great. Oh, this tastes good. Let's make a batch first before Thanksgiving so you can see how fabulous it is. And no one would know the difference. No one's gonna know the difference. Oh wow, I didn't know there was this thing called Earth Balance. Thank you so much. You're welcome, right? How about the stuffing? Same thing, right? You don't have to have 2 versions of each. So my point is that you also don't want to assume they know everything because change is inconvenient, right? Because change is, hard for people. But we can make it easier for them. But then the rest of the stuff in terms of how they perceive you and what you're doing, what you care about, that's just not our problem, how people respond to our values. It's not ours to worry about. Yes?
What are your thoughts about offering to bring your own food to a gathering like that? And so you're inconveniencing the person who's hosting you, and maybe bring enough that somebody wants to try it if you can. And the other thing is, so often people say, I have no idea what kind of food that would be. And I've got people who would try to make something, and then, it doesn't taste quite right. Did you cook this in water, like rice? Oh no, I used chicken broth, or beef broth, or if they stir fry something, it's in the same pan that they did bacon in, or fish or something. And so it seems to me that would be a good safeguard.
Okay, so did everybody hear that, or should I repeat it? Okay, so question number 1 is, what about bringing your own food to events like this? And number 2 is, one of the reasons to do that is because people, even if you tell them what to make and what you can, give them some guidance, it might not come out good, or they make it with, chicken broth and they didn't know. And number 1, give them my recipes. Just saying. Got a lot of them. And vegan table, there are, menu items and ideas for Thanksgiving specifically. So giving them good recipes, first of all, if you're gonna tell them to do something, give them good recipes. And again, unless they're just a little sadistic, hopefully they'll follow the recipe and not give you chicken broth, and then haha, I gave you chicken broth. I mean, I guess there might be someone who do that, but that's just mean. And you don't lose your vegan certification, you're still vegan, okay? So hopefully that won't happen. But definitely bringing food, I think that's fine. I mean, but I would talk to the people who are hosting so that they don't feel that what they've done isn't good enough, or that the effort that they're making, fine, you bring your own food, and why are you even coming, right? Talk to them, communicate with them about, I want to make it easy on you, I want to make it as easy as possible. Can I bring something? I'm happy to bring something that everyone's going to enjoy, but make sure you quadruple it, because everyone will eat what you bring, and then you won't have anything to eat, or eat first. Because that's what happens, because the food will will be fabulous, especially if they're my recipes. And then everyone's gonna eat the food that you're not gonna have any of. So yeah, so I think it's totally fine, not from a purity standpoint. For me, it's more of a, just making sure that you're having fabulous food and that people also see that fabulous food. But I do think it's important to talk to the people who are hosting. Yes, yes.
Sometimes I meet somebody new for the first time and we're eating together out and they're an encore and they ask me, does it gross your heart when we eat this kind of food or do you mind? And, I'm sitting down from the meal, I don't want them to feel uncomfortable and don't always know how to answer that. Honestly and politely.
Yep. I've talked about that before. So when you're sitting down with someone at a restaurant who is not vegan, and they say, oh, would this bother you if I ate meat? Or would it gross you out? Or would this offend you, right? Any form of those questions. And so how do you answer it so that you don't make them uncomfortable? Aren't we so sweet to always constantly worry about everybody else's feelings? But somehow our own feelings aren't valid enough to say, yeah, that would bother me. Would that offend you? Do you want me to tell you the truth? Would that offend you? Yeah, it's upsetting. Would this bother you? Yep. And you know what? It might make them uncomfortable, but they're putting you in a position that you shouldn't be put in because they want your approval for what they're doing. They want you to condone it. They want you to say, it's okay. No, it's okay. So you can do that, and then you'll be uncomfortable, and they'll be just fine. So we have to decide that. It might be uncomfortable. Is that the worst thing in the world? If it doesn't bother you, then say no. But if it does, they're asking me. They're asking the question. So again, I am not saying to create, enemies and that. That's not my intention at all. But if they're asking you the question, this isn't about just making them feel better about it. And they're ultimately asking your permission. So you can give it to them or not. I don't want to. Yeah.
I have two small kids and I love his language. They talk all the time in the podcast. And I'm having trouble now with them. They're asking for things like chicken nuggets. I'm not even aware of eating chicken nuggets, but no one else does. And they do say veggie sauce, but you have things for, for our. So anyways.
Yeah, it is trickier, it's true. So the question is, she has 2 kids, and so when they say, can I have chicken nuggets, she knows they're Gardein chicken nuggets, they're vegan chicken nuggets, but not everybody else does, and so how do you do that, right? I mean, it is tricky when you get to those kinds of things, the vegan meats and that kind of thing, because I really struggle also with different spellings of things like chicken without the C and the just apostrophe N, right? But it means something. We know what it means when someone says vegan chicken nuggets. We know that means the thing that looks like the chicken that we ate when it was just the real chicken, right? So those are a little trickier. I would just say, tell them to say Gardein or vegan chicken nuggets, or vegan nuggets or something like that. Those can be a little trickier when they're, or the hot dog, same thing, vegan hot dogs. Those, you can say vegan hot dogs. And it is important for them to know that when they're out in public, also in other people's houses, that they're asking for vegan chicken nuggets. I mean, I would assume they're young enough that you're doing the talking for them when you talk to the parents. So if they're going to other people's houses, right, or schools, or... Okay, that's good. Giving them... Right. How old are they?
He's almost 3 and my
3 and 1.5. Yeah, they're young. They're really young. But you're teaching them the language. For sure. Well, they have lunches, they have brunches they're going out, these 3-year-olds. They're making their own dates and going to brunch and, and they don't know what to say. Yeah. Yeah. And so I assume you have, but it might not just be one conversation. Have you talked to your kids about why you don't eat animal-based chicken nuggets? All right, well, sure. She's saying it's harder even for the meat-eating people to realize, the kids to realize that they're even eating chicken, that they're even eating chicken, real chicken. So when they hear, a vegan kid say, I want the vegan chicken nuggets, all of a sudden, and then where you could also get to a situation where the parents are like, your kid came in here, and now my kid's asking me about the chicken that I've been feeding them. They didn't know it was chicken. Well, that's not my problem either. That's also called you can't shield your children from information, and that's also not your problem. but that might happen. So yeah, I mean, it really does take speaking to your kids and sitting them down, and when they come home and say, Mommy, I had a chicken nugget because I wanted it, and you say, okay, you know, I get it, so let's sit down and you do whatever you have to do to talk to them and say, this is why we don't, and here's the language you can use, and here are the words you can use to ask for what you want. And that's where it comes into teaching them now, the positive aspects of that it's not inconveniencing them, that they're asking for what they want. And that's not a bad thing, right? We do tend to think that like asking for what we want is something we should be ashamed of because we think that we're inconveniencing people. But teaching someone now to just ask for what you want and then whatever you say is not theirs, like that's really awesome. But he might wind up eating, you know, an animal-based chicken nugget. And this is gonna be a process, I know. This is the process, it's called parenting, letting go, doing what you can to give him the values, both of them, you know, the values and the information they need, and then let it go. I mean, there are gonna be things you're gonna have to let go of, just warning you. No, I know. No, of course. No, you're like not at 3, 1.5. Well, they're already going out for brunch with their friends, so it's advanced. Yes.
How do you feel in a compassionate way when someone who has made something vegan for you before and gets offended that you will not make something non-vegan for them? Because that has happened to me, and I don't do it, but my initial reaction is to just get.
Who are these friends you people have? You need like new friends. So the question is, how do you deal with someone who will make something vegan for you, but be offended that you don't make something non-vegan for them? They can eat everything you make. Yeah, you need new friends. I can't help you. I get new friends. The expose. You know, you talk to them. You talk to them, you know? And if they're really, I mean, look, here's the truth too. When we do make these changes and they do rock people's worlds, and there might be some people who might not be able to handle our change, relationships change forms too. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. I mean, things change, people change, relationships change. And that's part of the process, again, of living our own values, right? So what's the alternative? Not living your own values? Not that you're saying that.
Yeah, it's sometimes I want to bring up religion because if I were Jewish and didn't want to cook a certain thing, they would totally understand that. This is my family I'm talking about. But then I also don't want to compare veganism with a religion.
Right.
And I don't know how to explain it in a way, even though it's my values. Like, why can't you understand my values if it doesn't have anything to do with a religion?
Sure. So she's saying that this is family, so that explains everything. So yeah, done. Like whatever. Okay, that's just lifelong. But then she wants to make the analogy between if she was Jewish and kosher, and they would understand that. But I don't want to make the comparison between veganism and religion. Fine. Okay, so with family, it is a different story. It absolutely is a different story. And look, I'm going to say it. I think one of the reasons family have a harder time with our change is because they're the ones who taught us what to eat, especially our mothers, especially if we were breastfed. I mean, we were like the most primitive relationship you have with your child is feeding them, nurturing them and nourishing them with your own food, right? I mean, that's about as close as you can get. And then they are the ones who instill the values in you, and they're the ones who teach you the foods you're gonna eat, and they're the ones who are making this food all the time. And then you come to them and say, I'm not eating that way anymore. And they feel like, what was wrong with what I fed you? There's a rejection that takes place. It really does. It's really, subconscious, and they wouldn't even probably admit it, but I do think that's what's going on with our families, and I think that's why it's even more volatile with our families than with friends, because they're the ones who fed you. They're the ones who gave you these foods, and you're saying, I don't want it anymore, and they feel rejected. So all I'm saying is, just remember that. And if that's where you start from, then maybe your reaction to them would be different, which is, no, this isn't about, no, Mom, I love your cupcakes, and thank you so much for making them vegan for me, but this isn't about you. You gave me all of this, and this was so wonderful, and I love everything you shared with me and gave me and taught me, but That's not what this is about. But your interaction might be different with them just by virtue of you thinking that and remembering that might be what's going on for them. Okay? Yeah, good luck with that, getting a new family. Yeah.
How does this stuff change when you have like no control or no expectation that the people are going to care about you? Like if you have like a business dinner at some restaurant that has been selected for you and you want to be able to eat, but you don't get to assume that anybody's going to care about your values or how you feel.
I love that. No, so then what about in business? And you have to go to a business meeting, or you don't want to presume that people care about how you feel. Well, if you're working at a company and you presume they don't care about how you feel, then you're working with the wrong company. Because if they are the right company, they should care about how you feel, right? I mean, they want to make their employees happy. I mean, that should be the basis of a good company. Maybe I'm idealistic, perhaps, I don't know. But I see this all the time. So obviously I don't work in a company, but I ask for what I want when I am going anywhere, and I see my husband do it, and I see very good friends do it, and they're in business, and they have to go to these business lunches, and they have to go to these business events and business dinners, and you just ask for what you want. You just tell them, but you don't just tell them, you tell them what it is you give them some ideas of what they could get. You make it easy for them, especially the first couple times, and then after that, they'll understand. And I see it again and again, where coworkers or management or whatever it is will say, because you asked for it, because if you don't ask for it, they don't know what to give you. Hey, we got your back. We're having this dinner, this event. We made sure we had some vegan options for you, and you will see that. I think we have to raise the bar, and again, ask for what we want. And I do believe when we speak to the highest in people respond from the highest in them. But we have to give them the chance. We have to give them the benefit of the doubt that they will do it for us. Look, you might ask 5 times and it takes 5 or 10 times before it happens, but it will happen because again, like, there really is a basis of concern for their employees if they're doing an event and they want to make sure everybody's happy. But it comes from you. And then I think you'll find that people really are responsive.
Will you talk a little bit about social media, specifically framing this? So we talked about family a little bit. I have family that are hunters, that are breeders. They do things that I don't want to participate in or see in my newsfeed. But sometimes they'll post something that I'm like, oh, hell no, I'm not responding to this. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Does everybody hear that in the back? Okay, so social media. Family, friends who are they're obviously your friends on social media, but they might post a hunting video or a hunting picture or something offensive or something rude, and apparently, man, my hand is different than I do. No. So it is really hard. It definitely is hard. So around social media, I definitely get this question a lot from people. So first of all, whatever you put on your feed, I think of the social mediums as our like satellite homes. And this is my house, like this is my home, and I'm gonna have this home be reflective of who I am and what my values are and what I care about, just like I am with my own physical home, right? So you don't get to come into my home and be rude and be obnoxious and be hostile or bring like dead carcasses in. Like you're not allowed to do that in my real home, so you're not allowed to do that in my online home. So you can certainly I really do think if someone's posting on your page those things, you have to decide how you're going to deal with it person by person. If you don't want to block them completely, delete things but don't respond. But if it is someone you feel like you can go to and say, I'd really appreciate it if you wouldn't put that on my page. Like find a way so that that's going to work. And you can manage that. When people put it on their pages, that's another story, that's their home. Because I know a lot of people will be like, I admire this brand, my family, my brother, I went out and a bunch of it, and they put this awful thing on their Facebook page, and I'm like, often it is true, right? They put this awful thing, it was really offensive, this really passive-aggressive thing about animals, or this really violent thing about animals, and it's so upsetting, and he's my friend, and I really care about him, but what do? It's not your business. It's not your business to do anything. Like, it's their home. So you, again, have to decide how you want to interact with them just in the real world and who that is and what their relationship's about. That's different. But it's not yours to even say that was offensive. It's their house. They can do whatever they want. And then, like I said, you have to decide. Now, those of you who know me know that I do not advocate commenting on posts and blog posts and Facebook posts, like thinking you're gonna have any kind of like effect or influence on Facebook in a conversation with someone that's already heated because it's emotional for both parties or all parties, it doesn't work ever. What do they say? I always forget the numbers. What do they say about communication? It's like 20% of what we say and everything else is inflection and body language. You can't read what people are saying, really read and understand what they're saying, unless you're talking to them. I mean, even on the phone, that's challenging, but in person is the best, right? But online, you have this flat, no inflection, you can't get emotional. How many times have we all thought or perceived or said, I'm sorry I wrote that. Sorry I said it that way. I didn't mean that. Oh, what I meant to say was, how much time have we spent like clarifying what we said and clarifying what we said, because nobody can understand it. So anyway, that's my short version, that's my short answer, or long answer about social media. Yeah.
I just have a question about where I live. There is a couple of restaurants, they're both the same owner, and they serve Vietnamese food, and I used to go there because they have a good vegan option, a couple of vegan options, but then one day they had dead ducks hanging in the window of the store, and I've never gone back since. It's probably been months, and I mean, it's no different than they're selling food with meat in it, but I can't get that picture out of my mind, and I just wondered if that happened with you, would you try to talk to the owners, would you write them, would you say something, or, I mean, they probably won't see the difference either.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So she said there's a Vietnamese restaurant. By the way, how much time do I have? I just want to get it. 9 minutes, okay. 9.4 minutes. Went to a Vietnamese restaurant that had vegan options. Obviously, Vietnamese usually does. And we'd go there and get those options. But then at one time she came and there were ducks, duck bodies hanging from the wall window, right? And she's never gone back since, and it was just so upsetting. And acknowledging that there is no difference, like they were already being served inside, but somehow seeing it as offensive. That's our own cognitive dissonance, right? Because we even know we also want to protect ourselves and not see it directly. And so when we see it directly, it's even more offensive. And when I talk to the owners, so again, that's their business, they can do what they want, but they're there to serve the patrons. So they might want to know, because you're not even telling them to do anything differently. This is the difference between asking for what you want. This is the difference between planting seeds and being attached to the outcome. You're not going to, if you went to them, you would be going to them. I would recommend you go to them and say, don't do this, or I can't believe you do this, or even hope that that's the outcome. But what you can do is go to them and say, I just want you to know I was a regular customer and I'm not coming back anymore, or I haven't been back because, and this is why. And it's a different culture, it is a different culture. There really is a very different way of seeing that. I mean, open Chinese markets, open Vietnamese markets, I mean, that happens a lot in those countries, and that's just that they don't see it. But they're not in, they're in a culture where they're also serving other cultures, and they're also being mindful of that, and they want their patrons to come back. So I just think it might be information that you might want to convey to them, and then listen to what they have to say. I know it's one of those little fine lines.
Sometimes talking to vegetarians, especially if they're your friends, can be even more challenging than if they're omnivores. I have a friend who's been vegetarian for 20-something years. She's an animal rights activist. She works on behalf of wild animals. Her and her husband both do a lot of work, very fine work. But she insists on consuming dairy because she says she can't drink her tea without it. And I've had numerous conversations with her, and I finally just shut down and don't express how I feel or what I think, or even question her about it, because I feel it damages our friendship. But I'm not feeling like I'm being true to my values in that relationship either.
Okay. So I'll repeat that. You didn't hear that. Okay. She can get the microphone, because these are good questions, and I like the way you convey them. So she's a friend who's been vegetarian for a long time. We've been friends for 20 years, and all this time she's an animal activist. She and her husband do a lot of wildlife rescue and work, and she insists that she can't give up dairy because she can't give up the cow's milk or animal milk in her tea. And Gail feels that that she wants to convey this to them, but you don't want it to damage your friendship. Okay, I got a lot to say about that. If all she's doing is putting dairy in her tea, okay. Gail said no. Okay, good. Okay, So that's her block, that's where she's at. Okay, and for 20 years you've been communicating this with her. It's not working. Stop. There are other people who want the information you have to give them, who will be open to it. And what's damaging the relationship is your perception of her. Because it's not about her. It's about your perception of her. And if you hold in your heart and your mind her compassion and what she is doing and how much she is helping other animals and how much she's doing by not consuming animal flesh. I'm not even saying do anything differently in how you talk to her, and I'm not saying condone it in your head. I'm not even saying that. I'm saying hold in your heart her compassion and what she is doing and meditate on that. I mean, just dwell on that. And what will happen is your perception of her will shift. And I'm just saying, you might see some stuff happen, but that's not even the reason to do it. The reason to do it is for you to let go and not be so attached to what she's doing and not doing. There are other people who want the information and inspiration you have to give. But 20 years, I think it's about long enough. You've done good. Move on now from that. Okay? Change the way you think about her. And that's being true to your values too, because you're compassionate. And I know that. Yes?
Can you speak about gifts a little bit at the holidays? I've had people try to gift me things or something.
Gifts at the holidays. I'm making this quick because I know we have 2 minutes, 5 minutes. So gifts at the holidays, when people gift you things that are animal-based, I have a video on that on YouTube. I did a whole video on gifts at the holidays, how to communicate to people that you don't want animal products, what to do if you get something with animal products. So I have a whole YouTube video on that on my YouTube channel, A Joyful Vegan. So go to YouTube and watch that because I think it'll help. Yeah. We have someone at the microphone. Hello. She's smart. She's like, I'm just getting up here.
Yoga. I get it when people, it's an omnivore, carnivorous culture, but when somebody is in a spiritual teaching role, of which there are so many, and particularly yoga teachers, because I've been doing yoga for years, and where I live, the yoga teachers don't see any conflict, but the ahimsa, nonviolence, they don't